What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to College Football Talk with Peter Burtonette. In today's video, I'm going to be going over the teams that I think are the dark horses in the ACC, or at least contenders to be dark horses. This doesn't necessarily mean that all the teams included in this video are what I think are teams that could win the ACC. These are just kind of a grouping of teams that are more in the middle of the conference that could easily rise and become contenders in the conference, or could certainly fall into mediocrity or potentially even outside of bowl eligibility. My last video, I talked about the teams that I think out of kind of the bottom third of the conference can get to a bowl and which teams I don't think will. So check out that video. But before I get into this one, if you go on to enjoy, please feel free to leave a like, consider subscribing to the channel, and turn on those post notifications so you're always up to date whenever I upload. Diving right into it with the team that has made the most media storm out of any in college football for probably a few years. I guess maybe outside of Deion Sanders, Coach Prime going to Colorado, I think it's probably the only comparable situation to what is going on at Chapel Hill at North Carolina. Obviously, there's been a media storm around a certain NFL coaching legend, both for him coming to the college ranks, which is what should be the story, and of course also because of the 24-year-old girlfriend that he has. That is, beyond my pay grade to get into all that. So I'm going to be talking about the Tar Heels football team in this video. They're going to have a quarterback battle among many other positional battles here. Bill Belichick was very just brief and pretty vague about roster type things during the spring. In fact, the Tar Heels didn't even have numbers during the spring, but we do know quarterback is likely going to come down to Max Johnson, who's kind of the incumbent player there, and Gio Lopez. Lopez passed for over 2,500 yards and rushed for another 460 at South Alabama. He had 25 touchdowns and just 5 interceptions. After spring, he announced that he was going to be changing schools. The Tar Heels where they do have some continuity, is on the offensive line. They have 3 offensive lineman starters coming back. It was the number 38 rushing offense in college football last year. Steve Belichick comes in, a defensive coordinator. He's kind of had some up and downs at various stops along his coaching career. I don't, however, think this is a team with the pieces to be an ACC title contender, though, of course, they do have the right coach for that without all the stuff that is happening off the field. Their schedule does set up nicely, however. I think that's really big for the Tar Heels because whether Belichick is using this as a springboard to get back in the NFL or whether he plans to stick around for a couple years, their key games really, they got TCU in the opener, but in this one we're talking about conference games. They've got Clemson at home October 4th. They've got Syracuse on the road a few weeks later. And then they've got a home game against Duke and at North Carolina State to wrap up the regular season. Outside of that, I can really see them winning potentially every other game that is on their schedule. They do go to Central Florida on the road. I could definitely see them dropping that one or that home game against TCU. But other than that, I think this team is probably a floor of 7-5, which is certainly a step forward. They were 6-7 last year, so that's an improvement in the regular season at least of a game. I think realistically this team could finish 9-3 though, and if they could steal one of those and finish 10-2, you never know if the college football playoff might come calling. But I think UNC, again, their schedule sets up for it, even if the team maybe needs a little bit of work, but Belichick's the right coach for that. Then, next up is Syracuse. This is a team that went 9-3. A lot of people kind of have them pegged a little bit lower. Fran Brown has done a really good job as the head coach there. But he's going to have a big task, a tall task on his hand this year, replacing Kyle McCord at quarterback, who was the number 1 passer last year in 2024, and also the loss of wide receiver Trebor Pena, who went to Penn State. Steve Angeli or Ricky Collins, the transfers from Notre Dame and LSU, are going to be battling it out at quarterback. Wide receiver Justice Ross Simmons is coming back from an injury. They've also got an exciting talent who, of course, is going to draw comparisons to Travis Hunter just because of the nature of what he's going to be attempting to do. That's true freshman cornerback and wide receiver Demetrius Samuel Jr. Now, I'm not here to say that on a talent level he is similar to Travis Hunter, but the similarities really are just that he's going to be attempting to play on both sides of the ball. If he is able to do that successfully, that gives the Orange a dangerous weapon on both sides of the ball. So that is something interesting to watch for this team. Again, I don't think it's really fair to compare him to Travis Hunter yet, but maybe he'll show that he is comparable. They have a couple other good defensive players, safety Deuce Chestnut and linebacker Derek McDonald. They've got a little bit of a tougher schedule. Home against Tennessee to open the regular season, at Clemson, home against Duke, at SMU, at Miami, and at Notre Dame. That's a lot of tough road games. Those are 4 games that I just don't really see this team winning. And I think that's why a lot of people have the Orange a little bit lower in the ACC projections this year, just because of that schedule. Next up then is Duke. The Blue Devils under Manny Diaz have been really good the last couple of years. They improved to 9-4 last year. They're adding quarterback Darian Mensah from Tulane. They've also got 4 offensive linemen starters coming back. I've talked about this before. If you saw my video ranking the top 5 offensive lines in college football with former Montana All-American A.J. Forbes, he talked about continuity, and I'm going to kind of hammer that home in these previews because it is so important, and that's what Duke has in pretty good numbers there. Samir Hagans has 109 career receptions and 8 touchdowns. He's going to be kind of the guy that Mensah relies on, I think, at receiver. They've got kind of what I would call a B defense in terms of where they rank in scoring, passing, rushing, total defense, but they were really good last year in sacks, forced fumbles, and fumble recoveries. They led each of those categories in the ACC, 43 sacks, 19 forced fumbles, and 14 fumble recoveries. So +8 turnover margin, really good there. Wesley Williams and Vincent Anthony Jr., defensive ends who combined for 23 tackles for loss. Linebacker Trey Freeman has 173 tackles in 2 seasons. And then arguably one of the top cornerbacks in college football, a first-team All-ACC selection last year, Chandler Rivers, 3 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles, 3 quarterback hurries, and 8 pass breakups. And he's also joined by Terry Moore, who led the way with 4 interceptions. This is a really good secondary for the Blue Devils. Pretty solid defense overall. Again, the numbers don't quite back it up, but there are some really good players on this team that if they could take a step forward, they could maybe become what I would consider an A defense, which is kind of ranking among that like top 25 nationally. Their schedule is tough but doable. They're home against Illinois in week 2. That should be a really interesting game. Obviously, the Fighting Illini are projected by a lot of people to potentially be in the college football playoff discussion. If Duke wins that game at home, I think the Blue Devils throw themselves into that picture as well. Home against NC State a couple weeks later, at Syracuse the week after that, at Clemson the first week of November, and at North Carolina. I think the Blue Devils, they're a team that's not under the radar anymore. They kind of were, but a 9-win season, and I think they had 9 or 10 a couple years ago too. They're no longer under the radar. They're a good team. Manny Diaz is a good coach. And I think the Blue Devils can probably get into that 9-win territory again, and they might even sniff 10 wins this year. I think that's a legit possibility. Next up here is Georgia Tech. This is a team, went 7-6 last year, but they've got one of the best running back quarterback tandems in the ACC this year coming back. Haynes King at quarterback and Jamal Haynes. Both of those guys led the way to the Ramblin' Wreck, the Yellow Jackets being a top 50 offense. They're also bringing in a pair of Florida International FIU transfer receivers, Eric Rivers and Dean Patterson. Those 2 guys combined for over 100 receptions, over 1,850 yards, and 19 touchdowns. And they also bring back leading receiver Malik Rutherford. So this offense, they didn't rank super high last year, but they've got a lot of potential, a lot of continuity coming back this year. They also had the number 30 rush defense last year. They're bringing in the SoCon Defensive Player of the Year, Braden Manley from Mercer, and defensive tackle Jordan Vanderberg is also a player to watch. Linebacker Kyle Eifert and Oregon State transfer Melvin Jordan IV are a couple good guys in the middle of this defense. And then quarterbacks Amari Harvey and Omar Daniels are the guys to watch in the secondary. Their schedule, there's a lot of key games, I think, on their schedule. At Colorado, week 1, I think it's a Friday night game. Home against Clemson, at Duke, home against Syracuse, at NC State, home against Pitt, and home against Georgia. I see probably 2, maybe 3 games in there that are definite losses. Every other game in there, though, is one that they could win. Now, I think a game against Duke, I don't know if they quite win that. I think the Blue Devils are maybe a little bit better than Georgia Tech this year, but I could see them beating Syracuse, I could see them beating NC State, and I could see them beating Pitt. I could also see them beating Colorado on the road, so that leaves them then with Clemson, Duke, and maybe Georgia, though that game was obviously so close this past season, so you never know there. So that's kind of the outlook for Georgia Tech. I think they're probably an 8-win team, but I could certainly see them getting up to 9 wins. It's going to be tough to get 10. It's a possibility, but I think Georgia Tech probably is more around that 8-9 win total. Couple more teams to go over here. Pitt went 7-6 last year. They had about the best start you could have and about the worst finish. They started 7-0, then lost 6 straight. But this is an experienced roster coming back this year that will certainly be fueled and motivated by that poor finish. There's some disparity on defense. They were top 20 against the rush, but 122nd nationally versus the pass. They have an All-American linebacker, one of the best in college football, Kyle Lewis, 101 tackles, 16 tackles for loss, and 7 sacks. So he leads. He's a big part of why they were so good against the run last year. Defensive end Jimmy Scott is as well. They're also going to be adding Utah State transfer Blaine Spears, who was injured for all or most of 2024. Defensive tackle Nick James also is key to that run-stopping defense, and they've also kind of overhauled that secondary, which I think is really important for making that improvement. Quarterback Eli Holstein is back. All-ACC, all-purpose running back Desmond Reed is back, and a really good wide receiver trio, Kenny Johnson, Poppy Williams Jr., and Sensei Lee. All those guys are back, so pretty good offense coming back. Again, a lot of experience. The question is, though, is it going to be more of that team that started 7-0 or more of that team that finished the season with 6 straight losses? Their schedule certainly isn't easy either. They've got the Backyard Brawl at West Virginia, September 13th, home against Louisville, at Florida State, at Syracuse, home against NC State, home against Notre Dame, and then at Georgia Tech and home against Miami to finish the season. That backstretch is not easy, once again, for the Panthers. I could see them probably having a similar season to last year, maybe get out to a decent start. Maybe they pick up a little momentum, win that rivalry game against the Mountaineers, maybe beat Louisville, maybe even beat Florida State on the road. But then things get really tough. I think probably 7 or 8 wins is probably the Panthers' outlook for this year. 7 is probably the most realistic. I think their ceiling is probably 9 wins. So I don't think they quite get into that ACC contender territory. Finally, the final team, honestly, they could probably be their own video. If you want to see more on this team, let me know. If you want to see a total video, that's Florida State. They went from 13-1, just missing out on the playoff, controversially to some, to 2-10 last year. One of the worst drop-offs, if not the worst, in college football history. They had a minus 16 turnover margin. That's obviously a huge part of it, and a bottom 5 offense. This also, though, isn't the case of a team that was right on the edge, like Nebraska has been some years. Losing most of the games, like when they lost 9, Nebraska did, all by single digits or by a single score even. This was a Florida State team last year that some of their losses, 15 point loss to Boston College, 26-point loss to SMU, 16-point loss to Clemson, 22-point loss to Miami, 24-point loss to North Carolina, a 49-point drubbing, 52-3 at the hands of Notre Dame, and a 20-point loss to their rival Gators, Florida Gators, to finish the season. So that's 7 losses right there, where it's not like, oh, if something else went their way, they might have pulled it out. No, they got trounced in those games. There's a lot of question marks. No offensive starters return, though they have done a pretty good job, I think, in the transfer portal. Quarterback Tommy Castellanos is a pretty good dual threat coming in from Boston College. Gavin Sawchuk, along with Roydell Williams, a couple other backs, make for a pretty decent backfield. Wide receivers Deuce Robinson from USC and Squirrel White from Tennessee are 2 good additions. And then offensive linemen Adrian Medley and tight end Randy Pittman are both coming in from UCF. On defense, they've got 3 starters back, safety KJ Kirkland, defensive tackle Darrell Jackson Jr., who entered the draft and decided to come back to Tallahassee, and defensive ends James Williams and Stephen Thompson are coming in from Nebraska, and then Elijah Herring is coming in from Memphis. Florida State schedule, they're home against Alabama week 1, home against Miami, home against Pitt then in back-to-back weeks, then at Clemson, at NC State, and at Florida. Williams as well, just to kind of shout him out real quick, 7 sacks in 16 games. He's probably their top addition on the defensive side of the ball. So this team, that schedule, there are a couple games in there that I don't think they win this year. I think Miami, Clemson, and Florida are those games. Alabama, I don't think they're going to be gelling yet, so those are 4 losses. Pitt and NC State, any of those games really scream losses to me, but I also don't think this is a team that is quite good enough or frankly has the schedule to get back into the college football playoff discussions, nor do I think really they have quite enough to get in the ACC conference race, but I do think they are a lot better this year. Mike Norvell is a good coach. That last year, you would think is a blip. I guess we'll find out this year, but I do think Florida State takes some steps forward. But out of this group, if I had to pick a team that I think is the dark horse with the best chance to actually compete for the ACC title, I think it would actually probably be Duke. Their schedule is certainly tough, but one of those games is a non-conference game, so that won't affect their record in conference. I think if they can beat North Carolina and Syracuse, they probably can afford a loss to Clemson and then just got to beat UNC in the penultimate game of the season. So Duke is certainly a candidate. I'll talk in my next video about the top 4 contenders in the ACC. There's a pretty clear favorite, but I'll talk over the other 3 teams and that favorite in my next video. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below which team you think is the dark horse in the ACC to actually make a run at the conference title and a CFP bid. But thank you so much for taking the time to watch College Football Talk. I'm your host, Peter Burnett, signing out. Peace.